The Kansas sun, a painter of dawns, was just beginning its work, brushing the horizon with strokes of apricot and rose, when the foreign sound intruded upon Daniel Crawford's world. It was the unmistakable stuttering cough of an engine in distress, a mechanical lament that echoed across the expanse of his struggling farm. At 42, Daniel possessed an intimate knowledge of such sounds, a lexicon of automotive woe acquired through years of coaxing life back into ancient machinery. He paused in his inspection of the venerable tractor, wiping the stubborn smudge of grease across the denim of his worn jeans. His gaze traveled beyond the boundary of his property, tracing the ribbon of dusty road that cut through the undulating landscape. There, bathed in the nascent light, sat a vehicle that was an anomaly in this pastoral setting, a gleaming silver luxury car abandoned like a misplaced jewel. The hood was raised, exposing the intricate workings of the engine to the indifferent sky. Beside the car stood a woman, a figure of striking elegance, her silhouette outlined against the burgeoning day. She was clad in a dress the color of champagne, a garment that seemed to belong more to a ballroom than a rural roadside. Her hand was raised, clutching a phone aloft, a futile gesture in this area bereft of cellular signal. Her blonde hair, cascading in waves, caught the sun's early rays, illuminating the palpable frustration etched upon her features. Every detail, from the designer sunglasses perched upon her nose to the flawless manicure of her nails, spoke of a life of privilege and refinement. She was as incongruous in this rustic panorama as a delicate rose blooming amidst a field of hardy wheat. Daniel's initial impulse was to retreat, to remain within the confines of his own troubles. The farm, his ancestral legacy, teetered precariously on the brink of financial ruin, 3 months behind on mortgage payments. The crops, parched by the relentless drought, withered under the unforgiving sun, mirroring the slow erosion of his own pride. But then, the echo of his mother's voice resonated within his memory, a gentle but unwavering reminder. A person's true worth, Danny, she would say, isn't measured by what they possess, but by the generosity they extend when others are in need. With a sigh, Daniel retrieved his weathered toolbox and began to walk toward the road, each step a silent affirmation of his mother's enduring wisdom. "Excuse me, miss," he called out, his voice carrying across the still morning air. "Looks like you're having some car trouble." The woman turned, her expression a mixture of surprise and relief. Daniel found himself captivated by the startling clarity of her blue eyes, eyes that revealed a vulnerability that belied her confident facade. "Oh, thank goodness," she responded, her voice laced with undisguised relief. "I'm Sophia Montgomery. My car just decided to give up the ghost, and there's absolutely no cell service out here. I don't suppose you happen to know anything about luxury vehicles?" Daniel couldn't suppress a wry smile. The irony of the situation was not lost on him. "Well, I've spent most of my life keeping machines running with baling wire and ingenuity. Let me take a look." As he began his examination of the engine, Daniel was acutely aware of Sophia's presence, her gaze following his movements with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Her phone remained clutched in her hand, a useless talisman in this digital desert, but she had ceased her frantic attempts to find a signal. "Do you live around here?" she inquired, her tone devoid of condescension, infused instead with genuine curiosity. "Born and raised on that farm over there," Daniel replied, gesturing toward his modest homestead with a sweep of his hand. "Fourth generation Crawford to work this land." A faint smile touched his lips as he added, "Got dirt in my blood, I reckon." "It must be nice," Sophia said, a wistful note creeping into her voice, "having such deep roots in one place." Something in her tone, a subtle undercurrent of longing, prompted Daniel to glance up from the engine. "You don't sound like someone who's had that experience." Sophia fell silent for a moment, her gaze drifting across the expansive landscape. "My father and I," she began, then paused, searching for the right words. "We move in circles where people know your net worth before they bother to learn your name. Sometimes, I find myself wondering what it would be like to be valued for something other than my family's money." Daniel, his hands delving deeper into the intricacies of the engine, discovered the source of the problem, a loose connection that had disrupted the electrical system. As he worked to rectify the issue, he found himself stealing surreptitious glances at his unexpected visitor. Her presence here, In this place, so far removed from her accustomed world, was a mystery that intrigued him. There, he announced finally, closing the hood of the car with a resounding thud. Try starting her up now. The engine responded immediately, roaring to life with a smooth, confident purr. Sophia's face illuminated with a radiant smile, a genuine expression of gratitude that reached her eyes. "You're a miracle worker," she exclaimed. "How much do I owe you?" Daniel wiped his hands on a rag, his brow furrowed in contemplation. "Nothing," he said eventually. "Just being neighborly." Sophia appeared genuinely perplexed. "Nothing?" she repeated, her voice tinged with disbelief. "But you took time from your work, used your tools." Daniel shrugged, a gesture that spoke volumes about his values. "Sometimes," he said simply, "people help because it's the right thing to do, not because there's something in it for them." For a long moment, Sophia simply stared at him, as if he had uttered words in a foreign language. It was a concept that seemed utterly alien to her. "Would you?" she began, then hesitated, as if unsure of her own audacity. "Would you mind if I asked you something?" Daniel, intrigued by her hesitation, nodded encouragingly. "What's it like living here?" she asked, her gaze sweeping across the landscape. "Really living here, not just visiting?" Daniel leaned against the car, surprised by the depth of her question. "It's honest work," he replied, his voice tinged with a quiet pride. "Hard work. Some years are better than others." He gestured toward his struggling fields, a silent testament to the current hardship. "This year," he admitted, "this year's testing my faith pretty thoroughly." Sophia nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Are you married?" she asked, her voice soft. Daniel hesitated, a shadow crossing his face. "Was married," he corrected. "She decided farm life wasn't what she wanted after all. Can't say I blame her. It's not an easy life for everyone." Sophia nodded again, her eyes filled with understanding. "I'm sorry," she said sincerely. "That must have been difficult." Daniel shrugged it off with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Life has a way of teaching us what we can handle and what we can't," he said simply. "What about you?" he countered, turning the question back to her. "What brings a city girl out to the middle of nowhere, Kansas?" Sophia hesitated, as if reluctant to reveal too much. "I was visiting a college friend in Topeka," she explained. "Got turned around on the back roads trying to find a shortcut." She paused, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. "My father would have a fit if he knew I was out here alone." Daniel raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her reluctance to involve her father. "Protective?" he suggested. "Controlling," Sophia corrected gently. "He means well, but he sees the world as full of people who want to take advantage of our family's success. It makes it hard to know who genuinely cares about you versus who cares about what you represent." Daniel studied her face, his gaze piercing through the veneer of designer clothes and flawless makeup, revealing the loneliness that lurked beneath. "That sounds like its own kind of prison," he observed quietly. "It is," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Over the ensuing weeks, Daniel found himself increasingly surprised by Sophia's frequent returns. She would rent a car in town and drive out to his farm, each visit accompanied by a carefully constructed excuse. She claimed a desire to experience the reality of rural life firsthand. She expressed an interest in sustainable farming practices. She insisted that she simply needed a respite from the pressures of the city. With each visit, the duration of her stay grew longer. She would sit on his porch, observing him as he labored on his equipment, peppering him with questions about farming, about his family's history on the land, about the profound satisfaction of building something with one's own hands. The easy comfort of their conversations belied the vast chasm that separated their backgrounds. "You know," Daniel remarked one afternoon, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the wheat fields in hues of gold and crimson, "you never did tell me what your father does for a living." Sophia fell silent, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves. Daniel began to suspect that she might not answer. "He owns Montgomery Technologies," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "You probably haven't heard of it." Daniel nearly choked on his coffee. Montgomery Technologies was one of the largest tech companies in the world, a global behemoth whose influence permeated every aspect of modern life. Everyone had heard of it. "Sophia," he began, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Please," she interrupted, her voice pleading. "Please don't look at me differently." She turned to face him, her blue eyes filled with a raw vulnerability that tugged at his heart. For the first time in my adult life, she confessed, someone sees me as just me. Not as Thomas Montgomery's daughter, not as a trust fund baby, not as a business opportunity, just Sophia. Daniel set down his coffee cup and looked at her, truly looked at her, seeing beyond the trappings of wealth and privilege to the genuine soul that resided within. You're still the same person, he said softly, who's been sitting on my porch for 3 weeks, asking thoughtful questions and helping me shell peas. Your father's bank account doesn't change who you are, does it? He reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. Not to me. 2 months later, Daniel stood in his kitchen, the worn linoleum cold beneath his bare feet, staring at the official-looking document that had arrived in the morning mail. It was a foreclosure notice. Despite his tireless efforts, despite working 18-hour days and selling off valuable equipment, he was on the verge of losing the farm, the land that had been in his family for 4 generations, the very foundation of his identity. The letter trembled in his hand, a tangible symbol of his impending failure. He was still clutching the notice when Sophia arrived for her usual afternoon visit, her face radiant with the simple joy of being in his presence. "Daniel, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. He wordlessly handed her the notice, his heart heavy with despair. Sophia read it twice, her face growing paler with each line. The cheerful light that had animated her features was replaced by a grim determination. "How much do you need?" she asked, her voice devoid of emotion. "Sophia, no," Daniel protested, shaking his head vehemently. "How much?" she repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I won't take your money," Daniel insisted, his pride warring with his desperation. "I won't be just another person trying to use you for what your family has. What if I'm not offering because of what my family has?" She countered, her voice soft but firm. "What if I'm offering because of what you've given me?" She stepped closer, her gaze locking with his. "You've shown me what it feels like to be valued for who I am, not what I'm worth. You've let me help with your work, treated me like I had something to contribute. Do you know how rare that is in my world?" Daniel looked into her eyes, seeing the same vulnerability that had first drawn him to her on that dusty roadside. He saw a genuine desire to help, a longing to be accepted, a yearning for a purpose beyond the confines of her gilded cage. "There's something else," Sophia continued, her voice filled with a quiet intensity. "I don't just want to save your farm. I want to be a part of it, a part of this life you've built. If you'll have me." Daniel stared at her, speechless, his mind reeling from the audacity of her proposal. "Sophia, you don't understand what you're saying," he finally managed to stammer, his voice hoarse with emotion. "This isn't some romanticized vision of country living. It's hard work, uncertain income, and more heartbreak than triumph. Most years I've lived with certain income and uncertain hearts my whole life," she responded, her voice unwavering. "I'd rather have the opposite." 6 months later, Daniel stood in the very spot where he had first encountered Sophia's broken-down car, the place where their unlikely story had begun. But now, she stood beside him, no longer the picture of polished perfection, but a woman transformed, her designer dresses replaced by practical work boots and worn jeans, her manicured hands now calloused and strong from honest labor. The transformation was not merely superficial, it extended to her very essence, to the depths of her soul. "Any regrets?" he asked, his voice tinged with a playful skepticism, as he watched her survey their flourishing fields, the golden wheat swaying gently in the breeze. "About leaving behind my old life?" she countered, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "None," she replied, leaning against him, her body relaxed and comfortable in a way he had never seen before. "Except maybe," she added with a teasing grin, "about falling in love with a farmer who's too stubborn to accept help gracefully." Daniel laughed, a deep, resonant sound that echoed across the fields, and pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Your father's still not speaking to you," he observed, a hint of concern in his voice. "He'll come around," she replied confidently, dismissing his worries with a wave of her hand. "Eventually, he'll realize that I didn't marry beneath me. I married into the life I was always meant to live." As they walked back toward the farmhouse, hand in hand, their steps in perfect unison, Daniel reflected on the profound and unexpected ways in which life could change, on the unpredictable twists and turns that could lead to unimaginable happiness. Sometimes, he mused, the most profound transformations begin with the simplest of gestures, with a small act of kindness offered without expectation of reward. Stopping to help a stranger in need. Seeing past superficial appearances to the genuine person beneath. Having the courage to trust that love can bridge any divide, no matter how vast, between two seemingly disparate worlds. In the end, he realized, it wasn't about her money or his land. It was about two souls finding in each other exactly what they had been searching for all along. Acceptance, purpose, and the kind of enduring love that grows stronger through shared work, mutual respect, and an unwavering commitment to building a life together, a life rooted in the fertile soil of shared dreams and unwavering devotion. And in the quiet Kansas evenings, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues, Daniel and Sophia would sit on their porch, listening to the symphony of the crickets, and they knew, with a certainty that transcended words, that they had found there forever, in the most unexpected of places, in the most unconventional of ways.